I just think we haven't pushed the boundaries of technology and innovation in the fire suppression and extinguishing space. We just haven't. We've been, frankly, working on old protocols. We're working on old technology. I mean, I'll remind folks the 911 system in California is an analog system. It's not even yet digitized. In our new budget, we are proposing to fix that. But we are still spending time reacting. We're not doing enough to prevent and suppress fires immediately. So this notion of an X Prize avails ourselves to the best and the brightest minds around the world and invite them in. It's pay for performance. Government, taxpayers don't pay a penny unless they come forward with a solution. And the money that funds this all comes from the private sector.
Governor, can we back up a little bit and just explain the notion of what an X Prize is
and
what the intent here, the hope is with this particular competition?
X Prize is the opportunity to create a competitive environment where innovators come together from outside of traditional silos and disciplines, and they mash up and they come up with creative solutions to solve some of the world's biggest and most vexing problems. And clearly now one of the biggest and most vexing challenges we face as a state, and you're seeing this around the world, are wildfires. And bringing to bear some people outside of government and outside of the state and around the world to address this issue in innovative and novel strategies and approaches, I think affords the opportunity for the state to take a real leadership position. X Prize is a big deal around the world. It's a brand that's well known. Reason we're going to be doing space flight, our kids are going to enjoy orbiting around the Earth at very low costs, the equivalent of Southwest airline costs, is because of the X Prize. And that's the spirit that we want to bring, that kind of entrepreneurial spirit to this sector.
The layman may be asking, great idea, what's the prize?
The prize we're going to hope, we're scoping the prize. We actually raised the money to scope the prize. The prizes are typically $5 million to as high as $25 million. So they're not insignificant, and that's why you get a cross-sector of people from around the world, usually teams of people. And one of the remarkable things about the X Prize is a lot of the prizes that are awarded come from people that have no background in that subject matter, but they look at the world from a different perspective. And all of a sudden you've got folks from New Zealand that are solving a problem in Milwaukee, and their expertise is water, and yet they solved an issue related to oil because they take that technology and they translate it. So that's just a for instance, but it gives you a sense of my optimism that this prize could, I think, provide us some really interesting strategies.
And again, this is private.
Private money, not a penny. And this is one of those things universally, no one could be upset about this. If they are, they're just upset people because this is not government writing a check. We're not wasting taxpayer dollars. We're not asking the government to do more. We're not creating a new bureaucracy. No bureaucracy, 100% privately funded, and it's performance-based. If it works, we deploy it. If it doesn't work, we thank everybody for their effort.
Inside, you talked about antiquated camera systems, analog 911. There's a problem here, obviously.
Yep.
What ideas, innovative ideas, are you hearing beyond things that you've talked about?
Well, you know, and I don't mean to give a lazy and flippant response, but the amount of money we're investing this year on early detection, fire suppression, pre-positioning, and fuels management is unprecedented in California's history. We have put in a historic amount of money into improving our technology and equipment. Hundreds of new cameras are being deployed, better weather monitoring, better response management, pre-positioning assets, more fire engines pre-positioned. We are going to be working in a more collaborative way on approaches on interfacing with cities and counties on emergency planning, opt-in technology, opting out alert technology. We're having a summit this June, bringing the best and the brightest from across this country together to compare best practices. We started these fuel management programs that we had never moved so quickly. We're taking things that literally over the next decade we're going to be done, and over the next few months are going to be done. I waived some environmental rules to do it, but 35 top priority projects are now currently underway, impacting 200 communities in the state. So we're getting serious. We're going to do our best, but I don't want to overpromise as we enter the fire season.
Is the idea that once a project is picked or a project wins, that they will eventually receive state funding? And then how long are we talking that process?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that the technology already exists, we can just redeploy it or recalibrate it to the extent it's new novel technology and we want to procure it. That certainly would be available for consideration. They may come up with an idea that already exists, but we're not using for that purpose, that costs the taxpayers not even a penny. That's the exciting part about these X Prizes. In some ways, it begs the question, why don't we do more X Prizes to solve big problems in social services, not just as it relates to fires, et cetera? And that's something, honestly, we'll look to pursue. And I just think there's no greater sense of urgency for people today moving into fire season than what are we going to do differently? Because these last 2 years pounded us. 139 lives lost in the last 2 years. We lost over 22,000 structures last year, 12,000+ the previous year. 2.5, almost 2.8 million acres was burned down in the last 24 months. We can't take it any longer. And it's no longer a Northern California issue versus Southern California. This impacts every part of the state, and it will impact the utilities. You have a utility down here that, as I said, is one bond rating away from junk bond status, entering into bankruptcy. That is how vulnerable we are moving into this wildfire season. And some people may disagree, think global warming's a hoax and climate change is made up and it's some liberal fantasy and some conspiracy, but something ain't right as it relates to these wildfires. And it's not just poor management. With all due respect, a lot of these fires are not wildfires. Ask the folks up in Malibu, there's not huge forests there. A lot of these are vegetation fires because the hots are getting a lot hotter. The dries are getting a lot drier, and you're seeing phenomenons that we've never seen in our history, in our lifetime. These fire tornadoes, storms within firestorms that are taking shape that are simply without precedent.
Governor, you talked about the environmental concerns. You've waived environmental protection rules previously. Say somebody comes up with a great idea, and there's an environmental concern. How do you reconcile it?
Well, public safety first. Got to protect lives, protect property as we protect the environment. I don't think that's a false choice. I think you can do both. Let me give you for instance. These 35 priority projects that impact 200 communities, I have the head of natural resources, the head of the EPA that personally sign off on this. And they're making sure before we move forward in an expedited manner, rather than waiting 2 years of bureaucracy and process, that they are taking a real hard look at any environmental considerations. We're not neglecting the environment. I think you can find some balance. I think, frankly, we've been paralyzed by process, and it's been abused. And I remind my environmental friends, and I hold lots of them near and dear, that we lost 2.8 million acres, and there was no environmental consideration about the impact on species, the impact on rare and endangered fill in the blank. And so I think this is a wise and appropriate approach.
On the subject of meaningful investment, can we talk a little bit about homelessness? Your
Good.
new budget plan has $1 billion set aside for homelessness. That would be a historic sum. Where do you see that money going?
It's out of control. It's unacceptable. People have the right to be outraged, infuriated by what's going on with the homeless challenge in this state. It's a disgrace. It's happened on our watch. We own it. We got to own up to it. One thing, as a former mayor, I don't think mayors can't solve it alone. So I want to acknowledge that, because I know we love going to City Hall saying, Mayor, what are you doing about this? County supervisors, what are you doing? They can't do it alone. Got to regionalize solutions, and we've got to have a state that's engaged. The state has been completely absent the last decade, as this is much worse. $1 billion focusing on a value proposition. Shelters solve sleep, housing and supportive services solve homelessness. So our focus is multifaceted. Rapid rehousing, prevention money, keep people in their homes is a top priority, and if they fall out of their homes, get them rapidly rehoused. We will do temporary navigation shelters, but we want robust services connected to those shelters to move people off the streets more permanently by addressing the underlying reason they're out on the streets and sidewalks. More mental health money, more substance abuse money, more intervention money to deal with early psychosis, not waiting until that psychosis manifests on the streets. You're going to see an unprecedented amount of flexible money given to the cities. $275 million was given to the biggest 13 cities, including San Diego, for discretionary purposes. what's working here already. Now you have more money to amplify and grow those programs and move forward. We're trying to reduce the burdens. We have expedited environmental review for shelters. Some will be very happy about that. Some neighbors may be very upset about that. But with all due respect, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we cannot afford to do things the way we've done in the past.
Your response to people who have
We're
sticker
good.
shock over the $213 billion budget, how do you respond to that?
Record amount of surpluses, record amount of money set aside, $30+ billion now of resiliency, unprecedented that we paid off all of our debt that we inherited from a Republican administration, $34.7 billion, every penny of that paid, $9 billion to pay down pension obligations, 7 tax cuts. I think people have a lot to be enthusiastic about, and we're going to be able to weather a downturn, which is inevitable, in a much better way than we have in the previous years.
And speaking of the budget, there are much lower projections for cannabis sales tax moving forward into 2020. Why do you think that is? And a lot of legal operators feel like there isn't a lot of enforcement against illegal operators. Will that change?
So a lot of the money we're putting in is on increasing enforcement, more provisional licenses, and significant efforts to try to persuade, and answer your question, localities to participate. The reason it's slower is cities and counties aren't allowing, because we provided them the autonomy and choice, that aren't allowing not only cultivation but retail sales. Full stop. That's the reason. Good news, still in excess of $250 million. That money is going to go to child care, substance abuse treatment. It's going to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and CHP on impaired driving and grants for youth safety programs. But we're going to step up our enforcement and protect those that are doing the right thing and go after those that are still doing the wrong thing.
Governor, I'm hearing from people in the industry that the track and trace or seed to sale system hasn't really been fully implemented.
Correct.
And the state is losing out on tens of millions of
It's
dollars
a fact.
in tax revenue.
That's why I said provisional ballots, or rather, I'm sounding like it's a campaign, provisional licenses versus temporary licenses. Temporary licenses don't have to participate in the track and trace system. Provisional licenses do. So we are overemphasizing. I just got here. I'm inheriting this. We're going to fix this. And it's going to take 5 to 7 years. I've said this for the last 2 years. I said, everyone be patient here. No one is patient. But I cautioned everybody years ago to be patient. It will take years to transition. We're now 16 months into this, and we are going to transition over the next few years, more provisional, which means more people participating in track and trace, more enforcement, which will encourage more people to get provisional licenses, and encourage through best practices the adoption of retail in a way that softens the edges of those local leaders that think prohibition is still the best approach.